Hey, welcome back to Ideas and Impact. I'm your host, Jeremy Jones. Today we're joined with Giovanna Elias, and we are going to be talking about creating new personal relationships, maintaining and strengthening personal relationships. In this culture that we're in right now, sometimes that can be difficult, especially as you get older and you especially go in business for yourself. It can be very isolating. And I thought this would be really beneficial so that folks can build a new or strengthen the personal network that they currently have. And Giovanna is somebody that you and I connected recently, and I'm really impressed with you. And you shared some insightful things with me. So I thought this would be a great conversation for the listeners here. So before we dive in, Giovanna, welcome to the show. Would you mind just introducing yourself, a little bit about your background and the business that you run today?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having
Sure.
me. And hello, everyone. I'm Giovanna Elias, and I call myself a human connection and communication expert. And so essentially, I have a background initially in communications and human rights law. And then I went on to going back to school to do holistic health and then furthered my studies in neurolinguistic programming. So, not to mention, I've spent probably over 15 or 20 years traveling the world. So, a sort of combination of all of my education backgrounds and then, of course, personal experience. And I was thinking, how can I sort of piece all of these things together? And of course, my communication and human rights background was more about recognizing the atrocities and the problems in the world internationally. And my holistic health background was more about recognizing the internal problems we have mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually within ourselves. And so I thought, okay, what's the bridge there? And this is how we came to communication and more specifically, conscious communication. And so when we have a healthy relationship with ourselves, we can then create healthy relationships with other people. And the bridge to doing that is really knowing how to consciously communicate and of course, knowing first how to communicate with ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
understand ourselves and recognize ourselves to then be able to build those relationships, meaningful relationships, both professionally and of course personally, because everything in life is a relationship.
That's when people are at the end of their life, they don't talk about, I wish I would have worked more hours at work. It's like all about the relationships. So you make a really good point there. Let's go to big idea number one and get started here. So the learning the art of asking quality questions to get better, to get to know people better. Tell me about this, like how you discovered this or how this became very insightful or important to you, and then maybe we can dive into some examples.
Certainly. So, for everybody to really have an understanding, I actually call my system of work the connection code, and it's a 9 key system. And so, what I'm really sharing with you today is a bite sized bit, and we're digging into 3 keys really briefly. And so, the first key we're speaking to here is actually called curiosity. And this is really about knowing how to ask quality questions, first and foremost to ourselves. Remember, I said the relationship starts with self. And so we have to understand first, Jeremy, what are these quality questions? What is it that we desire? What do we want? What do we value? What do we need? What are our boundaries? And so asking ourselves these questions and peeling back the onion on what's going on a deeper level and consciously within ourselves now allows us to have a greater sense of awareness. And then that shows up in how we communicate with other people. And that allows us to be able to be very clear with other people in our communication and let them know what we value and care for and need and desire and whatnot. But the other side to that coin is also knowing how to ask people quality questions. And so this can show up in business, for example. Do you know how to ask your employees what do they desire? Why are they in the company? What are they working towards? What do they value? Because that will actually keep them wanting to stay in the company and giving more of their energy and their attention and time and dedication to the company. And vice versa. Employees also knowing how to ask for what's important for them. And of course, this leads into another piece that we're going to dive into later, which is confidence. But it's about knowing how to ask the questions, even if maybe you don't understand a task at hand, you don't know what needs to take place, you misunderstood, or you didn't hear correctly in a meeting. Knowing how to ask quality questions to then clarify something to get something done well. This can also be in our personal relationships. And I see this time and time again
Yeah.
that I've worked with couples, they get into marriages, their marriages fall apart. I said, did you not ask each other quality questions? Did you not ask each other about, do you want kids or not? How many kids do you want? How do you want to raise them? What religious background are you from? Are you culturally attached to that or not? What do you value? What do you like? Do you like to work out? Do you not? So these all seem almost basic. And yet so many people don't ask each other quality questions. They get involved, they get invested, and then they're hurt in the end. And I say, did you not see this coming? So if we can learn the art of actually how to ask and really know what's underneath someone and what they value and need and desire and all these different elements, then we could avoid a lot of conflict.
So I want to make sure I'm not overlapping on one of these other big ideas here. But I wanted to ask you a follow-up question on this, and then we'll move on to the next one. So around asking questions, one of the things that reminds me of is what someone just called small talk, like small conversations and meeting new people. What advice do you give to people? Because that can be tough sometimes. It's like especially when you don't know if there's a commonality or whatever. When people you have commonality with, it's easy, easy conversation. With someone you meet, it is sometimes difficult to have an engaging conversation with someone you have no idea without feeling like you're intruding on, asking too personal questions or whatever. So since we're on this topic of asking quality questions, what's your advice in that making good conversation, asking questions that without feeling like you're being intrusive, but really getting to know someone? What's your best advice there?
So I love this. And I'm going to say two parts. Yeah. First, I think people struggle to break the ice. And in order to break it, it's actually the commonality is the environment. So using the environment as the commonality, maybe you're at a work meeting or a network, or maybe you're in a dance class or wherever you might be. That's the commonality point. Could be a coffee shop, something super simple. Use that environment to leverage the conversation, to facilitate the conversation. In terms of the second piece you asked me, which is refresh me.
Creating conversation points. Yes, without feeling like, tell me about your house. Or, it's like, how do you create these, just engaging conversation to get to know someone?
Exactly. So it came back, it brain farted and shot back into my brain. Yeah. So I always suggest to people to offer disclaimers. And this really shows that you're conscious without being intrusive. So this could very simply look like just saying, oh, I'm really curious. Would you be open to sharing with me about this? Or I'd love to know more about that. Would you be comfortable to tell me about it?
Oh, I see what you mean by disclaimers, kind of like softening the question, right?
Exactly. So you're now showing the person before you even throw out the question, you're showing them I'm aware enough that I might be entering into a personal space. Don't feel obligated to have to respond, but I would genuinely like to know. It comes from a sincere place. It comes from a curious place. It comes from an I'm interested in knowing you deeper place. And so when somebody now has that awareness before, that disclaimer to warm up the question, now they know, oh, okay, where it's coming from, as opposed to, okay, why are they asking me that question? Where did that come from? What are they trying to gain out of this? Right. So it sort of softens the guard a little bit. And they're like, okay, this person's aware that we're going into deeper territories. Maybe we should go there. Yeah. So at the end of the day, Jeremy, it's really about delivery. It's about your tone. It's about your presence. If I've got a smile on my face and I'm really present with you and I say, Jeremy, I'm super curious. I'd love to know about your marriage. Now it's like, okay, like it's coming from an authentic place. I'd love to know about your relationship with your kids. Do you have 3 or 4? Do you feel connected to them? Now you're not feeling like, okay, why is she intruding in my...
Or like interrogator type of a feeling. It softens it. I love that. That's such a great tip. Appreciate you sharing that example. Let's go to big idea number 2, and that is clarity. Being extremely clear about what you value. You want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So as you are probably starting to notice as we go deeper into this, every key feeds off the other. So once we've gotten curious about ourselves and other people, now that helps us gain clarity. And that allows us to be even that much more aware and that much clearer about what exactly is important or meaningful to us. And so when we have that clarity, now we can communicate with that clarity. The biggest conflicts I ever see in any situation. So once again, we can talk business. Why do certain tasks not get completed on time or not get completed well? It's because the task may have not been communicated clearly or may have not been written down, or something got broken down in the communication process on one side or the other, that it wasn't clear and therefore it couldn't be executed well. Yeah. The same in relationships. Once again, if I believe you said one thing and you believe I said another thing, now we have a breakdown in communication and understanding. And so conflict is so much more likely to arise when your understanding of something is different from mine, when our filters and our perspective on the very same thing is actually different because there's no clarity on it. And so I always suggest, this be professional or personal, to repeat back what is being said. And so, for example, if we are in a heated moment or a conflict, then I should repeat back what you said to me and say, clarify. And same as a meeting. I heard you say X, Y, and Z. Is this correct? Did I understand this correctly? Okay. Even going so far, depending on the situation, to write things down. So anytime there might even be money involved, important to write that down, note it down, even have signatures, depending on, once again, the situation. Even with a partner, it's like, we had this conversation on set date. This is what was understood from it. Writing that down, that way it's not just another conversation that took place that we forgot about the details of, and then we revisit later and each person's story looks different. So that clarity is super important to avoid conflict. And it's also important to know who you're keeping company with. And I'm really, really big on being intentional about who we keep company with. And of course, I'm sure you've heard before, Jeremy, we become a byproduct of the closest 5 people to us. For sure. And so if you're not clear and intentional about who you welcome into your life and why you welcome those people into your life and the types of conversations you're having and whether your values are aligned or not, then you're just having what we could arguably say are meaningless relationships, or relationships that you're just sort of allowing rather than being intentional about. And I think that clarity, once again, first in ourselves about what's important for us, now allows us to be clear about what relationships we're building out in the world.
How have you seen that impact either your life personally or maybe someone you've worked with? What's been the outcome of that?
So where they don't have clarity, or where they do?
So what's been the impact when they have clarity, the difference that it makes?
Oh, immense. So let's talk.
In what ways? I want to hear example of what ways.
So for example, hiring people. So I've had a client that for years struggled to hire good people in his work and his business. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, I'm like, are you clear about the type of people you want on board that are working in your company? Because if you're not clear on who you're taking in, you're just taking in whomever, you're hiring whomever, but you're not necessarily aware of the type of employee you want to employ, then you're going to be having average employees working for you that may not necessarily be dedicated to the job. Yeah. Same thing as romantic relationships that I've taught a bunch of different single men to get extremely clear when they're dating. Yeah. Do you know what type of woman you want in front of you? Do you know the qualities you want? Because I find often single men get excited that they have, the attention of a woman. Fast forward a few months or a few years, and they're like, this is not working. And that's when I say, are you clear on your values? So most recently with a client came to me and he's like, I've been beside myself for weeks that I'm not sure whether to go back to my old relationship or not. And I said, we need to get clear on what you value in your relationship. And so, a couple hours later, we went into the depths of his values and understood that actually there were many things that didn't align. And so he didn't go back to that relationship because there was a misalignment in many core values.
Yeah, it's such a great example. It's amazing You made such a great point there. It's like it's a really, really amazing what happens when you get clear on stuff. Like even direction you want to go in life. It's the difference of I'm going to kind of go in this direction or I'm going north. It's like there's a direction, and it's the same kind of clarity with these sorts of things. Is when you at least have a pretty clear target, you're more likely to hit the target. If you have no target, then don't be surprised when you do not hit what you expect because there was no target. So you gave such a great example there. So I really appreciate that. Let's go down to the third one, and that is confidence, meeting new people and asking for what you desire and initiating difficult conversations. Let's talk about meeting new people specifically.
Yes. So let's even go one layer deeper.
And confidence. Yep. Go ahead.
Confidence. So we are always communicating with our body language and our energy first and foremost.
Yep.
Our facial expressions, our tone, our presence. Mm-hmm. Have you ever met, Jeremy, someone that's walked into a room and they just grab your attention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a presence. This is an energy. This is a confidence that is like a magnet. It attracts people. And the opposite can be said too, that if energetically you don't feel secure in yourself, people also sense that. They can smell that energy off of you. And so while it's very, very unconscious, this is not humans consciously walking into spaces, let's say networking groups or events that we go to and say, oh, they look confident. They don't. It's a feeling that we get off of someone. And when we feel that someone is comfortable and secure in themselves, that actually unconsciously gives us the permission to also feel comfortable in their presence. So that energy attracts people. Like I said, it is like a magnet. And so once again, how does that show up in business? If I'm walking into a space, a networking group, for example, and I feel really comfortable, really secure, really confident in myself to be able to just walk up to people, say hi, approach them, ask them about themselves, the likelihood of me getting a new, business client or partner or deal or whatever it might be is extremely high compared to the next person that walks in and is very nervous within themselves and doesn't feel secure to be able to approach and talk to somebody. Now, of course, I always say we're not born with confidence. We build confidence. And so this is not an expectation like, well, you should just be confident and some people just are and some people are not. No, it doesn't quite work that way. We have different levels of confidence in different areas of our lives. So you may have someone that's very confident to make, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in their business, but they're not comfortable to go talk to a girl. You may have somebody else that is, extremely, comfortable to be at, let's say, family gatherings or around their friends, but then put them in a networking group and they just fall apart. So there are different areas where confidence can show up. And it's really about the art of learning how to channel the energy from one area where you do feel secure into another area. And when we do feel that security in ourselves, people sense that in us. And
so how do you bridge the gap from an area you're confident and certain in to these other areas? How do you bridge that?
Great question. That's my coaching, but essentially,
what's the starting point? And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to it, and you have to work with someone for a period of time. I realize that. What's the starting point to bridging that? What's that look like?
Starting point is the first step. In other words, there's actually 7 keys to this. It's called the recipe of confidence, but really simply put, we are confident. We are most confident when we are familiar with something. And to be familiar with something requires us to practice it, to experience it over and over and over and over again. So just like you would see, any sort of athlete, professional athlete, how many times have they practiced their craft before they feel confident getting up on a court or, wherever they're performing? And so confidence is built. What's the first step? It's in taking the first step. So confidence is built in taking the first step in whatever it is that you're doing and repeating it and being consistent and being constant with it and maintaining that practice until it becomes more and more familiar and more natural. And at some point, you just start to feel really comfortable in that area of practice, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. So, like, as an let's give it like a realistic example. One thing that comes to mind is like if you are uncomfortable in going to like a networking event in a space where there's people you don't know, maybe practicing just whenever you walk into a space where there's new people is to walk with that confidence. That would be one thing. With that, can maybe you speak to that or give an example of how someone puts that into practice?
Yes, I would go one step before that. So before even walking into that networking space, for example, and meeting new people, I would
Mm,
say, what is the work? What are the practices you're doing with yourself every morning and every evening? Because once again,
mm,
everything comes back to the relationship with yourself. So if I'm waking up every morning and dedicating, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes to do a breathwork practice or to journal or to get in touch with how I want to create my day, how I want to feel throughout my day, being intentional about my day, that then shows up in our practices throughout our day. Same thing at night. You've accumulated all this energy, all of this stress, whatever has taken place in your day. You now need to release that and let go of that. And so to then have an evening practice where, once again, it could be winding down, it could be meditating, journaling, taking a warm bath, whatever it might be, to unwind the energy of the day and to be really intentional about how you want, one, what you want to let go of, and two, what you want to bring forward into your next day. And so that already puts our body into a homeostasis state. And what that really essentially means is it relaxes our nervous system. And the more that we can maintain those calm states, the more our body and our brain actually starts to rewire itself so it feels that sense of calmness in everything that we do. It's not just when I close my eyes and do meditation for 20 minutes and I'm calm. No, it's that your brain chemistry over time starts to shift. So now the moment I walk into that networking group, suddenly I feel calmer. And it's not a forced thing like, oh, I need to show some sort of false
yeah.
energy. It comes from all of the time you've spent with yourself leading up to that moment. That's going to
Mm.
now show authentically in your energy rather than in a false sort of inauthentic way.
I love it. That makes perfect sense. It's in the preparation, caring for yourself, accepting yourself, and then you show up that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, much more natural, much more organic. Once
Yeah.
again, people don't consciously recognize these things, but
Yeah.
unconsciously they're like, I feel like that's fake. I feel like that's authentic, right? We can sort of sense that off of people. And that's the work we need to do with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, such great points. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these insights with the listeners here today. What's the best way that folks can connect with you and follow you online?
Certainly. So people are more than welcome to check out my website, giovanna-elias.com, or you're welcome to follow me on Instagram, giovanna.fjm.elias. We'll put all the links in, I'm sure.
Yep.
And I love to connect with people. We can certainly have a free 30-minute connection call and just chat with each other. And I'd love to know more about you as well. So those are the ways.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks again for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
You're welcome. All right, for all the listeners, thank you for joining us here today as well. You can get the show notes to this episode by going to askjeremyjones.com. Click on podcast, and you'll see this episode with Giovanna right there at the top, and we'll link up her website and all the resources mentioned here today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.